First and foremost, all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahushai, Bahashem, Rakakwadash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone. Peace and salutations to you, Akim Mordir, pushing his word in all sincerity and all truth. This is going to be a piggyback, a lamback, lamback of the Elder Brother Raquel comes video. The crisis will continue, and this image that you see here was generated by Gemini, as a summary of a conversation that I wanted to share in this video. So as you can see here, pretty much from left to right, you have measures accepted in a crisis, and the current crisis, that's taking over right now in the geopolitical space, is the war in Iran, which is causing global energy disruptions, with the Strait of Hormuz, being essentially closed, and the consequences, of this on the world and where the elites are planning to push this towards is what I wanted to go into in this lesson. And as the brother, Raquel, the elder brother Raquel very well, went into in his video as well. So you can see here, there's a few things on this screen, how this can lead to the UN Sustainable Development Goals, CBDCs, rationing. Here we have a generic politician saying every crisis is an opportunity. And then, of course, we have carbon credit systems, 15-minute cities, accelerating global transformation in a crisis, and then ultimately leading to what? Revelation 13, verse 16 to 17, which is that mark, that MOTB, that implantable RFID microchip, that you're going to need to buy and sell. So without further ado, let's get into the conversation that I have here. So I started with the prompt. The war in Iran is creating a fuel crisis globally, with some countries instituting or considering rationing, work from home, among other things. World leaders have often been cited as saying every crisis is an opportunity. How can this crisis be used to further UN Sustainable Development Goals, CBDCs, carbon credit systems, and 15-minute cities? It says the global energy crisis triggered by the conflict in Iran and the subsequent disruption of the Strait of Hormuz has pushed energy prices to historic highs. While the immediate focus is on supply security, international bodies and governments are viewing this shock as a catalyst to accelerate long-standing structural shifts, right? So for the UN Sustainable Development Goals, this crisis acts as a stress test for the 2030 agenda, particularly Sustainable Development Goal 7, which is affordable and clean energy, and Sustainable Development Goal 11, which is sustainable cities, right? So that goes into decarbonization push. The vulnerability of fossil fuel supply chains is being used to justify massive accelerate EU-style pivot. High oil prices make renewable energy projects previously seen as expensive as economically competitive overnight. Behavioral shifts, and the brother went into that into his video, the elder brother Raquel, how the government is trying to implement behavioral shifts in the population. Temporary emergency measures like mandated work from home, reduced public building heating or cooling are being framed as proofs of concept for the permanent energy-saving behaviors required to meet climate targets. CBDCs. Financial institutions are exploring CBDCs as a mechanical tool for managing resource scarcity and green financing. Programmed rationing. And we've been blowing the trumpet on this, right? Program rationing. In a severe fuel crisis, CBDCs could allow governments to implement smart rationing. Unlike traditional currency, a CBDC can be programmed with conditional logic, ensuring that fuel subsidies or allocations are used only for essential transport or by specific industries, right? Carbon credit systems. The energy crisis is expected to significantly increase demand for carbon credits due to two primary mechanisms. Fuel switching. As natural gas becomes scarce or expensive, many utilities are temporarily reverting to coal. To remain compliant with emissions regulations, these companies must purchase a higher volume of carbon credits to offset the increased CO2 output, right? So, and then you go into 15-minute cities. The concept of a 15-minute city where all essential services are within a short walk or bike ride is being marketed as a solution to fuel dependency anxiety, right? Tactical urbanism. Right? During the crisis, cities are implemented pop-up bike lanes or pedestrian zones to accommodate those who can no longer afford to drive, which is soon gonna be everyone. Even the Ella Brother Shapar was sending out something in the group, showing me that one of the things that they're pushing out now is gas cars. Gas cars are being pushed out right now, right? And they're being highlighted even more so now. And even companies here in Jamaica, who sell EVs and who sell like solar companies, they're marketing EVs packaged with solar panels as the new way to go, because you pretty much drive your car for free because you have solar panels that will charge your car at night or during the day, and then you just drive, right? No need for gas station fill-ups. Even if you want to use the charging ports that a couple companies here in Jamaica have, you don't even need to. You just buy a few solar panels and that's you, powered by the sun. That's being marketed heavily right now, using this crisis as a catalyst. So the brother was saying sooner or later, you won't have gas cars being driven, right? And then eventually, no cars at all, right? So I went down further and says, we've seen through examples of crises like the COVID pandemic that people are more willing to accept measures they would not otherwise consider under normal circumstances, right? So it says the concept you are describing, the use of a crisis to bypass normal democratic or social friction, is well documented phenomenon in political science or history. It is often referred to as the shock doctrine, a term coined by Naomi Klein, or crisis governance. And this is something that we brought up multiple times. I myself have brought this up multiple times, because the majority of the society will not accept CBDCs, or don't want to accept CBDCs, don't want to accept 15-minute cities, don't want to accept a carbon credit system, because that imposes heavy restriction on you from the government, heavy regulation, no privacy, all of that. You're pretty much in a technological prison, right? So what they need is the right crisis to push people over the edge to accept something that way they would not accept under normal circumstances, right? The core idea is that during a period of high fear or urgency, you not being able to fill up your cars, you not being able to buy food for your family, right? The Overton window, which is the range of policies acceptable to the mainstream population, shifts rapidly, right? Measures that would be seen as intrusive or radical in a time of stability are framed as emergency necessities. Look, we see the example just a few years ago with the COVID pandemic, right? People under normal circumstances would not accept a lockdown, right? People were literally locked in their houses, not being able to go out, right? Unless you're an essential worker. In some places, you weren't allowed to travel outside of a particular range outside your house, right? These would not have been passed under normal circumstances, right? So it says the Patriots Act precedents security over liberty. Just as 9/11 shifted focus from privacy to national security, a global fuels crisis shifts the focus from individual mobility to collective survival. When people cannot get to work or feed their families due to fuel costs, that's the driver, right? They are more likely to accept digital tracking to ensure fair resource distribution, aka rationing, or movement restrictions to save fuel or for essential services. So the idea is to force you into the system, right? And they force you into the system by doing what? By squeezing you, by applying the squeeze. And the squeeze is you cannot get to work or feed your family, right? The result, the emergency framework often outlives the crisis. Once the digital infrastructure for tracking energy use or fuel consumption is built, it rarely gets dismantled. This is going to be the new normal. You see that phrase that was pushed a lot, during the COVID event, right? So overcoming resistance to CBDCs. Currently, there is significant pushback against CBDCs. Here in Jamaica, they're barely used, and we've had it as legal tender for almost 3 years now, right? Here's the leverage. A crisis allows the government to bypass this debate by linking the new currency to direct aid. The Prime Minister said that just last year when the hurricane hit, Hurricane Melissa hit, he said this, right? I believe he said it during burial too, if I'm not mistaken, but they pretty much said that if we had this mainstream, we could immediately push out support to people. People could immediately get it. And he also said it in reference to the what do you call it? He also said it in reference to the national ID. Right. So continuing. So the leverage, it says a crisis allows the government to bypass this debate, for pushing back against CBDCs by linking the new currency to direct aid. If the crisis leads to mass unemployment or hyperinflation, the government can offer emergency relief funds that are only accessible by a CBDC wallet. And we see also during the pandemic, even America, they gave out surplus, not stimulus packages. Having a system like this in place, would justify, or push people to get it. You can only get the stimulus package if you have, if you accept the CBDC or if you have a microchip, right? By framing it as the fastest way to get money to those in need, the technical and ethical objections are sidelines. People prioritize immediate financial survival over long-term privacy concern because they're going to say the logistics involved in getting everybody's information, printing checks, mailing all the checks, cashing checks, all of that is just inefficient, right? Rapid urban rezoning. The 15-minute city concept has faced protests from people who view it as a way to restrict car ownership and movement. So that's gonna be fun, right? So I wanted to get something here, right? So this aligns with the quote that there are decades where nothing happens, and then weeks where, decades happen. The quote is attributed to Vladimir Lenin, perfectly captures the concept of punctuated equilibrium in political history. It describes how systems, whether they are financial, social, or urban, can remain in a state of stagnant stability for years, only to be completely rewritten in a flash by a catalytic event, right? So under normal circumstances, bureaucracies and public opinion are governed by inertia, meaning you want to stay one place if you're already at one place. People are comfortable with their habits, driving to work, using cash, living in sprawling suburbs. Even if those habits are inefficient, the cost, quote unquote, of changing them is seen as too high. That's the normalcy bias. You're living your life, you're stuck in your ways, you're stuck in your habits, and you think and assume that things will continue as the way it did. But we forget how quickly things changed during the pandemic just a few years ago. How overnight your habits were disrupted and rewritten, right? So it says the week that changes things. A crisis like a total fuel cutoff removes the choice. Inertia is not broken by persuasion, but by physical impossibility of maintaining the status quo. So the government won't need to persuade you to take the chip. They just need to put you in a condition where your survival depends on it, right? The rapid deployment of off-the-shelf solutions, that's where we get the problem reaction solution. Milton Friedman, a proponent of free market capitalism, shared a similar view from the opposite end of the political spectrum. Only a crisis, actual or perceived, produces real change. When that crisis occurs, the actions that are taken depend on the ideas that are lying around, right? In the current context, the UN, SDGs, CBDCs, 15-minute cities are the lying around ideas. They have been designed, debated, refined in policy for years. When the crisis hits, leaders don't have time to invent new solutions. They won't want it anyways. They reach for the ones already sitting on the shelves, ready for immediate implementation, right? It says the most significant part of those weeks where decades happen is the ratchet effect, right? Where once an emergency power is granted or a new infrastructure is built, like a digital surveillance net for fuel rationing, it rarely returns to its original state, meaning it becomes the new normal, right? So, of course, I asked it how this ties to Revelation 13, verse 16 to 17. The buy or self-constraint, it goes into what? Programmable money. CBDC's permission-based spending, the crisis as a catalyst, meaning it pushes it forward as a higher speed for adoption. Crisis as opportunity model, the mark as a solution, right? Social and economic pressure, we know all about that. Localization and physicality from cards to bodies, 15-minute cities and geofencing, right? So all of this is what's coming, right? So we can read Revelation 13 verse 16, and he calls it all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. So as we see these different things happening in the news, we link them to biblical prophecies so that we can blow the trumpet and warn those of you who have eyes to see and ears to hear that this is what's coming, right? This is how they're going to use the crises, right? And more crises are going to come, and the crises are going to worsen, and they're going to use them as a jumping off point, and a catalyst, to push these different legislation, right? And to change your lives drastically, right? So until next time, Shalom.